It's easy to get 2000 ELO in chess, and it's not about memorizing endless opening lines. You just need to focus on the right things when you play chess. It all comes down to using the right strategy. Once I have understood this strategy, it completely changed the way I played and helped me to join the top 1% of chess players. In this video, I'm gonna share exactly what this strategy is and how you can use it in your games. What's up, chess player? Welcome to the Journey to Grandmaster, the place where you can improve every single aspect of your chess game. I have been playing chess for 20 years now, and I've had fantastic victories where I absolutely crushed entire tournaments. But I also had painful, incredible losses where I felt miserable and I wanted to give up on chess and never ever come back. What can I say? Chess is a very tough game. But I have found a strategy that works very well for me and allows me to play the games I can be proud of on a consistent basis. I want to share exactly what it is and how you should use it in your very next game. On the example of the game I have just played in the German Bundesliga, I have played as white and I really have prepared for this game. My opponent played f5, he is an international master, and he plays this opening his entire life, which of course has advantages because he understands it very well, but it has also drawbacks because I had the opportunity to prepare really deep against this specific opponent. And that's exactly what I did. I played knight to f3, that's the Dutch Leningrad variation which my opponent played, g6, castles. So, of course, in the opening, you don't need to invent any bicycles, and so many players are crazy about memorizing all of the opening lines. You actually don't need it if you are not on a professional level. It's more important for you to really understand and master the key opening principles, which are controlling the center. You absolutely always and always have to fight for the center. Here is the small center, here is the big one. The player who is controlling the center is in the driver's seat, so you want to be that player. Second, you want to bring all of your pieces into the game. You want it to make as active as possible, and you don't want any unemployment going on in your camp. Finally, you want to make sure that your king is solid enough. It's like your child that you want to make sure is safe before you go to war against your opponent. So the opening is the stage of the game where you prepare every one of your resources to the battle. My opponent played this d6 move, the starting position. I'm playing knight c3, and now he plays queen to e8. The critical moment comes. That's the moment where most of the players start making horrible mistakes and lose their games. And I want you to understand it very clearly. At this stage of the game, late opening, early middle game, you have to figure out two things. What is your general plan idea that you want to implement in this game? And what is the respective plan and idea for your opponent? Once you have figured out those things, all of the moves you are making should be focused either on implementing your plan or stopping your opponent's plan. And the best case scenario is when your move is achieving both of those goals at the same time. Here is how to do it. So my opponent played queen to e8. I have to understand now what is his idea. Well, it's pretty obvious he wants to play e5. He didn't have enough defenders for it. Now he does. If he manages that, and if he plays e4, then he opens up this monster on g7 and shuts down my monster on g2. The next question is, how do I stop it? Do I have an opportunity to stop it? Here, I can't really stop it physically because right now it's an idea, and even if I play something like bishop f4 trying to stop it, well, he can renew the threat, something like knight h5, now the bishop is opened, so it's really difficult to stop it physically. He can also play something like knight d7 and get enough defenders for it. I played the move b3. It's something I have prepared. Another way, by the way, to stop it would be d5. So yeah, there are different possibilities, but what I have prepared is b3. Now, if you do play e5, then I do have some counterplay. I play bishop a3. I'm very active with the tempo. So whenever you play a move with the tempo, that means creating a threat. Your opponent cannot do what he wanted to do because you have created a problem for him and he needs to react to that. So that means a move with the tempo, and notice at the same time I'm developing my piece. So it's that multi-purpose move. I want to develop all of my pieces and stop my opponent's move. If I can combine all of that in one move, that is absolutely best thing that I can do and you should do in your games as well. So to prepare better for this situation, my opponent started with the move c6. It's a very important move. It covers the key squares and it blocks my bishop. But the drawback is, of course, it's slow. It doesn't play e5 immediately. So now I play bishop a3, again a multi-purpose move that stops the e5 idea and develops my bishop. Now if you play e5, well, first of all, the pawn is hanging, but even if it's not, there is a huge pin here, so you absolutely cannot play the move e5. Now the critical moment comes. My opponent plays knight to a6. I want you to pause the video for a second here and try to find the best move for white, knowing that you want to implement your plan, you want to stop your opponent's plan, and ideally you want to combine all of that in one move. Please try to find the best move for white. It will be a very instructive exercise for you. Okay, let's go through the system step by step. Once you understand and master it, you're going to immediately increase your ELO level by a huge margin. What is the idea behind your opponent's move? That's always and always the first thing you ask yourself. Knight a6, it looks like there is no idea, it's just a simple developing move. But please never treat your opponent's moves in this way. It's, first of all, very often not like that, and secondly, you're gonna miss so many important details and then lose the games because of that. Yes, it's a developing move, but what does it change in the position? Well, it controls those squares, but it cannot go here because it's covered by the pawn, it cannot go here because it's covered by the bishop. What else can black do? Well, we have said that e5 is black's idea, but he cannot do it and knight a6 doesn't change it. But maybe there is something else active that our opponent can do. We always start with the most active opportunities: checks, captures, threats, and active moves. Checks, well, there are no checks, our king is very secure. Captures, also absolutely not possible for black to take anything. Now it gets interesting. Threats, how can our opponent create a threat? And of course, we first of all look at the move and try to understand the idea. So what there can be a threat with this move? It cannot go forward by itself, but it controls the b4 square that it wasn't doing before. How can we use it? If you imagine, if you look at those pieces, and if you imagine this pawn to come all the way to b4, that would be horrible news for us. That's a fork and we are just losing our piece. That means that b5 is a very interesting idea. And knight a6 also helps in terms of having space for this rook to go, because if you just play b5, then after takes, this bishop might suddenly just win that rook on a8. Well, now it has space to go. So b5 is actually a dangerous idea. Now that we understood what our opponent wants to do, what we want to do, what would be ideal plan for us. Again, checks, captures, threats. We do not have any checks, we do not have any captures, well, reasonable ones. So what kind of a threats we can do? Also not a real threat because our opponent is pretty solid here, so at least not immediately. What kind of active moves? Well, we want to create counterplay. If our opponent is attacking on the queen side, then we want to answer in the center, since he is not able to attack in the center himself. How can we do that? Well, the most reasonable and obvious way is to play e4. That would be a very active move, and if we open up the center, then we can, for example, bring our rook here against our opponent's queen, and that would be very active for us. But if we do it in a straightforward way and just play rook e1, normally a very good move, preparing e4, the rook is against the queen, all perfect. But this way we don't take into account what our opponent can do, and therefore he can still play b5, and that's a huge problem we now need to deal with. So, you remember the best possible case is to combine stopping your opponent's idea and prepare your own idea. If you think this way, it's very obvious for you what to do. Queen to d3, that's the only move that at the same time stops this idea and prepares this idea. I hope you have understood this entire decision-making process, and believe me, it's going to be very helpful for you. Let's see what happened afterwards. Our opponent plays rook to b8. He is again renewing the threat of b5, and this time we cannot do anything about it. We cannot add another attackers for this square. There is nothing we can do, and in this case we should just not worry about it. If you can do something about the problem, then do it. If not, don't worry about it. Then the next, like you remember, every single one of our moves should be focused either on making our active plan or stopping our opponent's idea. Here we cannot stop our opponent, so we need to continue our own idea. At the same time, we have to be active, we have to feel this momentum. It's very important who is gonna create the first dangerous threat. If it's going to be our opponent, then he's going to be in the driver's seat. We cannot allow that. That is why rook e1 is too slow here, which seems like a reasonable move otherwise, because he plays b5 and immediately creates a threat, and now we have to react to that. We don't have time for e4. Meanwhile, if we are going to start with e4, if we are going to feel this momentum, then we are going to be the first one to create a threat, because after b5, we can just play e5. And yes, he can play b4 and 4 our pieces, but we already attack this guy. And he doesn't have any time to take our pieces, because we also created another threat here. He can take it back, and then he gets his piece back, but actually it's a huge position. We are going to attack here in the center exactly what we wanted, and if he tries to implement what he initially wanted, it turns out he's just not ready for it, because the pieces are not developed. Now we play queen d6, attack this pawn, there is no way to defend it, and if he moves it forward, then the bishop is hanging. So he's simply not ready for the move b5 yet. That is why he played here f takes e, but now we play knight takes e4, and the problem has solved itself, because b4 would never be a pin, there is no knight. He played bishop f5. Again, every time our opponent makes a move, we should forget about all of our ideas and think what is the threat behind that move. Here it's pretty obvious, he wants to win our knight. I just took it on f6 with the check, the most active move, and here my preparation is over. And this is a very tricky moment, because before I have made all of my moves according to the computer, I didn't need to think about it, and so I knew my position is good. But the challenge here is not to spoil it, like how do you continue? My queen is hanging, obviously. Again, the first thing you ask yourself, what is the threat? What can I do about it? And yeah, the queen has to go. The question is, where does it go? I played queen to e3 because it felt like a very reasonable move. The queen is here, very active, and it controls this diagonal, so I have some potential ideas like knight g5. Further, I was kicking myself like during the game that I haven't played queen e2, because it seemingly stops that idea that black had. Now, after takes, it's much more difficult to play b4 because the knight would be hanging. But what I haven't taken into account, that it's not just one idea that your opponent might have. Here, the queen actually does not control the g5 square, and black can take advantage of that and play g5. So you see, chess is very tough. Your opponent can attack you on both sides of the board, can attack in the center, and you have to be ready for everything. And in the best case scenario, you limit your opponent as much as possible. It's called prophylaxis thinking. And you don't want just to do that, you also want to combine it with doing something for yourself. So you see how tricky it is. Best case scenario, you combine doing something useful for yourself and stopping your opponent from doing what he wants to do. I played queen to e3. The best move turns out to be queen d2, but it's so tricky, like hard to understand why exactly this line is the best. He played b5. Yes, my move doesn't really stop it. Here I am taken, which is fine, but not the best move. I could have actually played rook to c1. That again is a multi-purpose move, which develops a new piece and deals with the opponent's threat, because now I can take with the rook and attack his pawn. I took on b5 because I was a hostage of my opening preparation. Every line I have seen, white should have taken here on b5, and so I didn't even consider rook c1 that much. But it's actually the wrong approach. If you are 100% sure that a certain move is the best in the position, you have just prepared it or you just know it, then of course you should go for it. If you are not 100% sure, then you have to be open-minded to all of the ideas that are possible in the position. Anyway, my opponent took, probably because of the same reason. He knew that normally you take it here with the pawn, so he didn't consider taking with the rook, which was the best. What to do now? Again, very, very instructive moments. Feel free to pause the video for a second to find the best move for white. You need to understand now what you want to do, what your opponents want to do, and what is the best intersection for you. Actually, we still have this idea that we want to bring all of our pieces into the game. The best move is very simple, just rook e1. Unfortunately, I haven't played it. So you see, even if you understand and master all of the important principles, chess is still a tough game. I don't say that I have all the answers and that I always make the best moves, but sometimes we overcomplicate things, and that is also something I don't want you to do. What I played here is knight g5, because somehow I felt that I have to be active right now. I don't have time for moves like rook e1, because he's about to play b4, then he was to play knight c5, and somehow I need my knight here so that my bishop is already opened and I have some ideas in mind, something like that. And indeed, this is fine. I can just even take here on c5, and even though I've given up my beautiful bishop, the position is absolutely great. I can even take, I create a lot of threats. What I wanted to play initially, instead of knight g5, was rook to c1, but I thought in the same line, it doesn't make any sense that my rook is on c1, because actually it's hanging just the same as it was on a1, and I could go to d1 both ways. I'm basically losing a tempo in this variation. But rook e1 was great, and actually rook c1 is still good, just bringing one of your pieces into the game, very active, very good. I played knight g5, which is not that great because I break this golden principle. One piece, one move. Please follow it in your openings, because that's the fastest way for you to bring every single one of your pieces into the game. And here, instead of bringing a new piece, I am making a move with the same one. My opponent plays b4 and then queen to b5. He's very active, he tries to get his counterplay. I finally played this move rook e1, but surprisingly enough, here it's not the best move. That is how tough chess is. Even though it's still a very good move, the problem is he plays knight to c7 and he wants to get to d5. That's exactly what happens. Like, I played rook e1 to have this additional idea to play bishop f1 and attack the queen and the knight behind that, and then maybe bring it to the c4 square to attack the king, give this check, because I no longer have this option of bishop d5 check. The best move, though, instead of rook e1 was to play knight e6, and that's also very instructive. Like, if you have already chosen the plan, in my case playing knight g5 instead of rook e1, then please proceed with it. You remember, it's better to have a bad plan than to not have any plan at all. You don't want your moves to be chaotic and not connected to each other. The reason why knight e6 is better, because it basically makes sure that this knight cannot move at all. Yes, you can exchange this knight, but then I'm gonna have two bishops advantage. I'm happy with that. Otherwise, the knight cannot move. I was afraid of something like rook c8, some stuff, but I still have rook c1, everything is fine. Anyway, I played here rook e1, it's not that bad. He played knight c7, obviously he wants to get to d5. And here we come to the critical moment. I just played h4, I wanted to make sure that the knight is not hanging in all sorts of variation. That's a very good strategy. In general, you don't want your pieces to be hanging, to be unprotected, because the more such pieces you have, the riskier it gets and the higher the chances you're gonna lose something. So knight to d5. The queen comes to f3, the most active move again. In every single move, you ideally, of course, want to create a threat for your opponent. At the same time, you want this move to be active and useful for yourself. So the knight is hanging, and surprisingly enough, the right move was knight to b6, and then black is more or less absolutely fine. But it's such a tricky move, like just to go back from b6, where it does not really have any active squares to go. But I guess the idea is that now, this idea is not legitimate anymore. The knight is controlling both of the squares where the bishop can go and attack the king, and so black is fine. My opponent played forwards, chose an active move, but the drawback is clear, it sacrifices a pawn. I took it, even though I had to give up my bishop's pair, and I'm a big fan of bishop's pair, I never want to do it, but this time I'm winning a pawn, and I don't exactly understand what kind of compensation my opponent has. So the position changes tremendously, and I want you to understand, because it's oftentimes that you're gonna get such a situation in your game. You're a pawn up, but your opponent is trying to create as many threats against you as possible. Very, very classical example. Your task here is just to stabilize the situation. You need to understand what kind of threats he creates, and we are gonna take a look at it here. So it seems like black plays queen to b4, and he's attacking the d4 pawn twice, and it's horrible, horrible threat for you. But actually, the real question you need to ask yourself, is it really a threat? Is it really dangerous for you? A lot of players, especially low-rated ones, are skipping this point, and that is why they sometimes make horrible mistakes. If it seems like it's really a big threat, but if we carefully look at it, let's say make a stupid move king h2, bishop d4, yeah, huge threat here attacking both pieces. But you remember, in case of my opponent this time, you always have to think what your opponent can do in response before you make your move. And here it turns out white has queen takes e7, threatening checkmate in one, and white is absolutely crushing. You might say, well, but queen takes d4 is a reasonable option, and after takes, the bishop is so active here. But guess what? We are still playing rook to takes e7, so even if it seems like you're in trouble, still always start with the most active opportunities you have in the position. Taking here this pawn with the rook is the active move. Going away, reacting to your opponent's move is a more passive decision, even though that one, for example, is still attacking the bishop. But then he can go back and like defend the pawn. It's not that bad for him. But if you take here, we sacrifice an entire rook, but then there is a huge problem for this king. Bishop d5, if you go here, it's just a checkmate, so you need to give up your rook, and then it's clear then that we are much, much better. Why it's so important to understand whether it's really dangerous for you? Well, because now you don't really need to care that much, and you can focus on rather what is the best move for yourself, what is the most active thing you can do. I do have a check here, which I played, bishop d5, that improves my position, and at the same time my opponent has to react to it. He cannot do what he wanted to do. He plays king to g7, and now I was thinking a lot, I have burned a lot of time here, and in the end of the day, I came back to the essential principles. If you look at this position, all of my pieces are active, doing something useful, except for this rook on a1. As simple as that, you don't need to invent a bicycle every time. So the best move in the position, simple enough, is rook d1. Even though the d4 pawn, as we have discussed, is not really hanging, it's still a useful move. The rook is never hanging there, and now my opponent has to decide what he wants to do, because I'm now perfectly ready to go into the attack. In fact, after this move, rook to c3, I encourage you to pause the video for a second and try to find the best move for white. You are going to be very surprised. This moment might have been the best combination in my entire life. The best move for white here is an amazing queen takes e7. And I was actually considering this option, but unfortunately not here and on the previous move when I played rook d1. Remember, I told you I have burned a lot of time. Well, I have thought that I can sacrifice the queen here. It's the most active move, so normally you consider it. And then if the king goes here or here, you just deliver a checkmate. That's easy enough. But he can go to here, and that's where the problem begins. Normally you want to play rook e1, and then you create this checkmate thread, and yeah, there are a lot of threads in there, and that's what I considered. But unfortunately, I can just take here, sacrificing the queen back, and then just play rook c7 to defend the pawn. He has an extra exchange, and everything is great for me. So I dismissed this queen sacrifice. Remember, that's a check, and so you must always start in this order: checks, captures, and threads. If there is a huge opportunity in the position, the chance is very high it's one of those three things. I have checked it, it doesn't work. But if you notice carefully what changes after this move rook c3 is that this queen on b4 does not control the e1 square anymore, and that's a huge, huge difference, because now in the same line I can just play rook to e1, and because he cannot take, this is just completely winning for white. Yes, I have seen that, but it still wasn't simple enough for me, because he just plays bishop to c8, and like, yes, I can take here, but he plays king to f5, and it's not clear if you're just a human being sitting on the table. But of course, computer shows us that that's a checkmate in a few moves. Takes, king goes to g4, rook to g5, king goes to h3, and finally a checkmate, bishop to g2. If I would have done that, then absolutely no questions, that would be the best combination I have ever done. You're gonna love it! I have made a free 30-day training plan so you can finally fulfill your chess potential. Every day you're gonna get an educational video to improve your chess and put your knowledge into practice. I'm so excited to have you in our community, where you have an opportunity to get your game to be fully analyzed by me completely for free. Make sure to secure your free spot before it's too late. The link is in the description. Unfortunately, I haven't, and it's not that simple, because in this line, once king goes to f6 and you play rook e1, black has this move rook g3, just sacrificing a lot of pieces back. Queen takes d4, you go away, and then bishop to d4, because you want to achieve some space for the king. You have to play rook e6 not to lose the rook and then take it back. And like, here you have a lot of material, you have rook and 2 pieces for the queen, and you continue the attack, so of course it should be enough, but it's not like you're 100% sure it's absolutely winning, especially when you think about it from a distance. And so that is the reason I haven't played it, especially considering the fact that I had a very good alternative, and that's what really makes it difficult. Because if queen takes e7 is the only move, or you're just worse, then even by a process of elimination, the chance is pretty good that you're gonna find it. But here I have this move queen to d2. It's a very cool move. It's creating the spin. The rook cannot move because the queen is hanging, and I'm threatening just to win it on the spot. And so that is probably what stopped me from this amazing sacrifice. My opponent played h6, somehow this knight was very annoying for him, but it loses here because knight e6, the very simple move, there are alternatives, but I thought, I'm just giving this check, he has to take, otherwise he loses material. And then I take with the bishop, and I cover this c8, very important square, and it turns out there is nothing he can do about this rook, it's simply going to be lost. He played rook b8 with an idea that now if I attack it, he can just take, since his queen is protected. But first I make this key move a3, you cannot take it, the rook is hanging, the only move you can make is queen a5 to still defend, but now again this queen is not protected, and so rook e3 is simply winning it. I thought the idea is for my opponent to take and then take here and pretends like you still have some play going on, but of course white is much better. Instead, after rook e3, my opponent just resigned. So here you have it. I haven't played the best game of my life and I have made some mistakes, but you see that if you have a clear mindset in terms of what to focus on during the game, following your opponent's ideas, so essential, most of the players miss it, then you have very, very good chances to play a high quality chess game and of course to win it and be happy about it. If you want to dive even deeper into this topic, this one principle will help you achieve your chess goals much faster.